Hi, it's Jo from Minerva. My quick sewing tips today are to show you how to put on a round neck facing. A facing makes a neckline lie flat so that it doesn't curl forward, or if you press it, it doesn't have any of the lining pulling up from the inside. It's really important when you use facings to use the same seam allowances on the facing pieces as you do on your garment, otherwise the two pieces will not fit together. When you join facing pieces together, you get a facing unit, so that's the complete piece of all the facings attached like this, and it will have the seam allowance on the side. You can finish that however you want. You can use pinking shears, you can use a zigzag stitch, you can overlock it, you can use a straight stitch. So if you want to finish the edge of your facing, this is the wrong side, you can turn that down once and sew with a straight stitch all the way around. Some people bind it. It depends what you want the inside of your top to look like. If you're a beginner sewer, just zigzag around the edge so that you can get your facing in accurately, because it's really the top part of this facing that needs to be accurate. The bottom just needs to not fray. Once you've made the facing unit, you then need to put it right sides together onto your neck hole, and you start with the side seams. So make sure that your seam allowances are lying flat and pin the facing in place. There might be other notch marks to make sure that you distribute the facing correctly around the neck hole. Once you've pinned it in place, check the seam allowances on the pattern and go ahead and sew all the way around, keeping it really accurate and making sure that you don't flip up the corners of your seam allowances, that they stay nice and flat. Don't flip the facing straight away. You've got a little bit of other things to do to make sure that it lies really nice and flat, and that is to clip the curves. So use some sharp pointed scissors just to clip around the curve. That will help it fold over. You might need more clips where the curve is more exaggerated. You might need to just take off a little bit of your seam allowance depending on what fabric you're using. If you're using something bulky, then you might need to take out just the tips of the seam allowance, because that sometimes helps it lie down flat, because you've got 4 lots of fabric there. And then the next stage is to understitch. Once the seams have been clipped, you're then going to understitch, which holds the facing on the inside and stops it flapping out. If you just press now, then you might get a little bit of the facing rolling back, and we want to stop that happening. So what you're going to do is press all of the seam allowances towards the facing. So all of that spare fabric that we don't need for our final finish is all lying in the same direction. And then you're going to put it under the machine, and from the right side you're going to sew 2 mil from the edge all the way along the facing. So none of that behind the scenes sewing will be seen from the front. It will just help your neckline to lie really flat, and I'll show you on the machine. Under the machine you'll have all of the seam allowance pointing towards the facing, and then you're going to take a really narrow line, 2 mil from the edge, that sandwiches the seam allowance to the facing. Don't skip understitching. It really does make your neckline lie flat. Without even trying now, that facing has flipped itself to the inside, and now I just need to press it so that the understitching is on the inside and the front just hangs from the facing rather than the facing rolling out to the front. Stop your facings flapping around or popping out. you can just put a little hand stitch at the end of the facing, or from the right side you can sew a line of machine stitches right along the seam. That's called stitch in the ditch, and you'll feel when the facing's ending, it ends about there. So right in that seam line, it will be invisible, you can sew a stitch in the ditch. And that's how you add a round neck facing. Come again soon for more sewing tips.